Yeah, I mean, if you're ready to go, say yeah. Apologies for getting the time wrong. I just typed in mountain time into Google, and it told me it was like two when it was three. And
Yeah, Arizona's weird. It's like I think the one place where there's no daylight savings time change, so
right,
it's got its own weird thing.
trapped in its own space. We will get started, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
It's going to be one of the stranger interviews for people watching if they haven't seen, but I think it'll go down well.
Yeah, hopefully they like my hands. So yeah, this is usually the vantage point people see whenever I make a video.
It's a good advertisement for you being like a hand model.
You
Like
know,
this,
I figured that would come up. I've actually had like I think two or three people DM me saying,
really.
hey, just wanted to let you know that I'm attracted to your hands. And yeah, that's a compliment, I guess. I don't understand, but yeah.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. For a while, I did streaming during the pandemic, and it
Mhm.
was mainly me drawing. So I just focused the camera on the drawing and the hand. And
Yeah.
I got a couple of comments just like, "Oh yeah, you have really nice hands." I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not really sure how to take it or what to do with that information.
Yeah, I don't either really. But yeah, it's a compliment. So
That's that. We're gonna start with what is usually a simple question, but for you maybe a bit harder, which is, who are you?
let's see. I mean, so go by the Thrift Creeper. That's kind of the handle.
Yeah.
No, just a guy that likes to do art, likes to stir the pot a little bit. Um, yeah, what started out as kind of I did the whole like anonymity thing at the beginning because I didn't want to get caught by anybody
Hmm.
if there was any issue with like, I don't even know if it would be considered like guerrilla art, but I don't want to get in trouble for anything. So I kind of put myself behind this character. And then over time I just thought, oh, that's cool. I like being anonymous.
Hmm.
It brings something to it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know you, the thing you're most well known for is recreating things from thrift shops, and
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, which is obviously
Yeah.
how I discovered you. Kind of how I discovered you. I actually knew your work before you were suggested, which
Oh,
was
really? Wow.
yeah, it
That's
was
awesome.
kind of
Thank
I'd
you.
seen your bits, and then Strange Folk Dolls had us on and suggested you come on, which is also another cool point, which you've worked with
Yeah.
her before.
Yeah, no, she's awesome. She's wonderful. I did a contest once and she won, so she got a piece, but she sent me some other artwork. It's just wonderful. Her kid drew a picture of a piece I made. So yeah, she's really, really cool. But
Yes.
so
I mean,
yeah. What I do is go to a thrift shop, buy some mass-produced piece that nobody wants, alter it, and then sneak it back in.
how do you pick pieces?
I mean, first off, I try not to get anything that's like obviously one of a kind, something
Hmm.
that somebody didn't put a lot of effort into, usually things that are mass produced. Um, like I actually, by my feet, I have one. So something that's definitely been mass produced.
Yeah.
There's probably thousands upon thousands of these out there. So yeah, I just go to the store. If it looks good, depending on the what it's made of. I usually avoid like plastics and whatnot because they need to be baked with the clay
Yeah.
that I eat. But yeah, it really just depends.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. And you started doing this a few years ago. Is that?
Yeah, it was during the pandemic, so I think like December of 2021. Went to a Goodwill with a friend, saw this like really sad dog figure, and I thought like I can make this sadder. So got it, sculpt over it, and then yeah, it's just been like a learning process ever since.
I like the fact that you saw a sad dog and was like, no, this dog could be sad. And I'm not
Absolutely.
gonna prove its life. Like,
Yeah. Absolutely. And then after that, I thought it would be great if I just snuck it back in, and then that's kind of what I've done ever since.
and you continue to do, which is hence the anonymity, which is a word I struggle to say.
Yeah, it is a tough one.
Yeah,
And anonymity. There we go.
we got there in the end. No, I kind of I understand. There is a there's a level of freedom to remaining kind of behind the scenes. Um, it was something
Yeah.
which I kind of tried to do with like a zine project I ran, and then got not found out, but like called on it. Um,
Uh,
which yeah, it was like a real interesting experience of there's this level of like, oh yeah, it's I'm able to do basically whatever I want in a different
right.
personality. Um, do you I guess maybe like a more conceptual question of when you're doing work like that, is this completely removed from your regular day-to-day life?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I work like a normal human job and then do this on the side. Like I would love to make art, all the time, and maybe that's kind of a goal of mine. But yeah, no, it's just kind of a passion project. I've had many friends and family look at me dead in the eyes and say, like, why aren't you selling these things?
Yeah.
They finally given up on that. Just because I think it's great to bring something anybody can find a piece, regardless of their economic standing or anything. Just find something that was, handmade, one of a kind. And then I like to keep people on their, I don't know, I like to surprise people. So if somebody stumbles upon something unique, or, if they're taken aback, to me, that's a compliment. So,
Definitely.
but,
Yeah.
oh, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just a part-time thing, just a fun side thing.
Yeah. A little level of catharsis in the day to day.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
I was actually thinking about this before I came on, and how these kinds of projects tend to come from people who are like over 20, you all on above, because when you do it as like a teenager, it's never seen as like just like a cathartic thing. It's seen as like vandalism, or
Sure.
something
Yeah.
untoward. Whereas as like an adult, you're like, oh no, this could be, there's like I don't know, legitimacy to it. And I don't know whether
Mhm.
you had that thought.
No, yeah, I was actually thinking about that when you invited me, just kind of like looking back, because I've been doing art for as long as I could remember.
Mm.
And yeah, during my like teen years, there was definitely some tagging and some stencil graffiti, and like that's when Banksy started, and a lot of inspiration there, even if it was like pretty shallow inspiration. But yeah, that is completely right. It's a lot different when you're older. So,
I feel
but
like it's more valuable when we're older.
yeah, I don't know. I think we just see the world differently at this point, and we appreciate things differently, than I used to. Back then, it was very political. Everything I made was political. These days, it's not really.
You saying your sculptures aren't political?
I mean, I pissed a lot of people off, which I
Really?
don't. Yeah, I don't understand. It wasn't until TikTok. On Instagram, people are like cool art.
Yeah.
On TikTok, I'll get things like there was a bunch of French people who were fighting back and forth in the comments section, saying like, "Oh, you defaced Virgin Mary," and then people would
Um,
defend it and go back and forth, and then I finally popped in, and I was like, "Who's Virgin Mary?" Just to throw people off. But yeah, no, some people are offended, but that's they're pretty rare for
mhm.
somebody to message saying like, "How can you deface art?" When really it's just again mass produced stuff so far removed from the artist that I don't feel like infringes upon their creation.
Definitely. I do. I think there is like especially when it comes to like guerrilla art or like street art. There's a very fine line sometimes with that kind of
Mhm.
thing of whether it's going to be accepted, whether it's acceptable to do it. I know I see a lot of stuff about tagging, because I follow quite a few of those accounts, and it's always interesting to see how the communities handle things
Mhm.
which go against things like tagging historical buildings
Right.
and like monuments and stuff like that gets people quickly ostracized.
Mhm.
But like you say, when it's the general public, you never quite know what's going to set them off and what they might
Yeah,
consider offensive.
definitely. You'll notice that too just by like location. So
Hmm.
in Phoenix, if you're in North Phoenix, if you you rarely see any graffiti because it gets painted over quickly. Downtown, people just come to appreciate street art a little bit more. So every corner has graffiti or street art on a wall. But
Is
to me, it's like little treasures. So like what I do or graffiti or anything like that, I don't know. It's you stumble upon it and you realize it's this unique little treasure. Just not something that you would expect to see, I guess, is what makes it even better.
that's something I actually agree quite strongly with. Of I think people take a lot more value in things when they do stumble across them. You know,
Yeah.
like when it's not sold to you, when it's not something which is just on a website that you can have shipped to you or sitting in a store. And yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that, which I guess is what I found interesting about when I looked at your work. Was it's like you're taking stuff from thrift stores, which I already think are a gold mine of just general ephemera, and then you're introducing like an extra layer of rarity.
Yeah, I mean, if I can. And it's just a lot of fun. Like I don't there's really no message in my artwork. There's nothing like I mean, I guess I don't know. The only message I could think of is just like mischief. I like to stir the pot, so but aside from that, there's no like I've talked to other artists and they're like, "Oh, I put this into it and this symbolizes this."
Mhm.
And with me, it's just, I like to make things look weird. That's like the base level of it.
I guess that's a valuable question then, in terms of if if art's fun, is it art?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think when you put, I don't, art is genuinely the best part of life because it's expression, it's connection with people, and I was watching a video about Bowie, David Bowie
Mm,
recently. He was talking about, oh crap, what did he say? I don't think it was selling to the gallery, but it was something like that, where he was saying, you make the worst art when you're making it for other people.
right.
Um, and that's a fine line because, like, when I started doing this project, it was purely for me. Like, I didn't have anybody following me or looking at what I was doing. It was just me and whoever bought the piece if they found it. Where at this point, there's a little bit more of like, oh, I need to work on this piece or I need to do more and more often. So I just am constantly reminding myself that I'm not kind of playing to the gallery or whatever.
I was going to say that's got to affect how you create or
Yeah,
introduce like
and
a level of pressure. I don't know.
yeah, and then a lot of people will ask, do you do commissions? Do you sell anything? And eventually, I am currently making something to sell, not like an original piece or
Mhm.
anything, but just kind of like a line of something. But yeah, I fully intend to just keep like original pieces. Those are the ones that I sneak in. Um, yeah.
Keep it going. I've been kind of following. It's interesting that we arranged to do this interview kind of this week. At least within the UK, there's introduction of new laws and new initiatives to commit like kick down what they call antisocial behavior.
Mhm.
And some level of that is street art, graffiti, is tagging, um, and it kind of raises the question of when something is considered illegal and when something is more considered art, because the likes of tagging, when you like you mentioned, kind of Banksy comes into that of if you're going to introduce these new laws, is he going to be included?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
is that going to be a
Yeah.
thing? And the same with kind of yours. I think it's there's a fine line between what's being done and what you're liable for. I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's and that's always been a hard line. Like
Mm,
I think of it never affect well, I mean it did affect us a little bit in the US. It was before my time, but like video nasties, like horror
oh
films
yeah.
back in the UK that were banned. Um, yeah, I don't, any kind of censorship of art is the wrong way to go. I mean, even just recently in Florida with the statue of David, um,
Yeah.
I just don't priorities. I feel like still aren't aligned very well. Yeah.
Do you think as artists, the more restrictions which are placed in, the more it's more needed for mischief and fun to be included in art to kind of point out how ridiculous it is being, or does it need
Yeah.
to get more political? I don't know.
I mean, I think it's let me think if I could remember the line. In Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which I love that movie, and at the end he does the speech, which is amazing.
Hmm.
But in the speech he says, "As long as men die, liberty will never perish." And that's kind of how I feel about art. You know, whatever happens, censorship wise or anything, I think art is one of those things that will always prevail, just because it's so tied to us in the way we express emotion, even if we're subjugated or if we're, in times of prosperity, we always feel that need to do that. So, with censorship, it's temporary. I don't think that censorship is anything that lasts. There's a line between, shouting fire in a theater and, uh, expressing yourself. So it's the middle ground, and it's always kind of been in that gray area. Just art in
Mm.
general, but like specifically guerrilla art and whatnot. I think it's just another facet of that a little bit.
I also think kind of like you touched on it there. I think it walks a fine line with what's considered like a prank
Right.
and what's
Yeah.
considered art. And
Sure.
I find it interesting how like you even kind of mentioned like social media platforms, pranking is a thing. It's like
Right.
a form of content. And they've struggled to find the balance. So
Hmm.
I don't know, as artists, I don't know if there's more of a struggle to find a balance between something which could be considered mean or offensive and something which is just more, tongue in cheek. I'm doing this because I can do this.
Yeah. No, I mean that's definitely a fine line. And I guess that it just depends on the intention of the artist, but
Mhm.
um,
But you
like
have no intention.
right, exactly. Like I have no intention except, I mean, again, mischief, but that if I can make somebody laugh, that's great. If I can make a video that makes somebody laugh, that's even better. Um, because I feel like the world is, uh, it's right now, especially just very complicated.
Mhm.
Everything is so extreme. Um, and like art, laughter is something that's universal and that it helps us. It's one of the best parts of the human condition. So that's kind of my artwork, for the most part is I try to put humor into it. If you see like a little baby figurine with a monster face, usually there's humor in that. And I think most people would find humor, except for those that are, I don't know, easily disturbed by something like that. I had one person comment, like, how can you deface a beautiful little child?
Do you find, I mean, I guess, do you find different generations react differently to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you consider like TikTok versus Instagram, a different
Mm,
generation,
that's
I
true.
noticed on TikTok things are a lot more literal. So if I make a video of me like cracking an egg in a piece and sculpting over it as a joke, in which I would never return anything with like a rotten egg inside, but
No.
people get very serious and they're like, "Oh my god, how can you do that?" And then there's how can you waste eggs, which I understand that part, uh, but yeah, no, there's a difference for sure when it comes to age and everything. Older ages tend to be a little bit more disturbed about things like that. Um, but I don't know. I'm one of those people that like if you can't tell just by like the way I talk or anything like that what my generation is, but I
Hmm.
genuinely have a lot of hope for the next generation or for the one that's reaching adulthood right now. Um, a lot of hope in them. So I'm curious to see how they react to artwork like that.
Mm.
And yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree. I think the younger generations and the generation coming, they're almost interesting in a way that we weren't to like
Hmm.
people above us. Because I don't know, like I got thinking about this morning actually in terms of how people react to advertising and different reactions to being sold something. and
Mhm.
how that's not necessarily like an age thing, but it's a cultural thing of what you grew up with and how you interpret imagery, and how like millennials and Gen X don't really get that bothered by advertising because
Mhm.
we were very aware of it. Whereas the younger generation have been born into a situation where it's everywhere and it's hard to tell what is and isn't an advert unless you've been through that process. So when we talk about art, we talk about how you interpret, I mean, content, even though I'm not a fan of that word as a description of that.
Right.
um, I think it's interesting to see how they react to stuff because it's
Sure.
they're receiving so much of it. Whereas, when I was younger, it was very much like, oh, you see this one cool thing, you may never see this one cool thing ever again.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And now we just get
No,
it.
yeah. I think our generation, it's going to be very interesting to see, we're again, like, there wasn't always the internet growing up,
Hmm.
whereas there is now. So, yeah, it should be interesting. I hope there's a lot less like infighting with generations. I Just the last couple of years when it comes to like boomers and Gen X
Hmm.
and Gen Z, millennials, a lot of fighting words, but yeah, I just look forward to the future and seeing what they do, and seeing where art goes. And I'm always trying to like monitor having any hard feelings about artwork because to me,
Hmm.
art will always be subjective. I've had friends who argued otherwise, and with like AI art, initially when I would see something like that, I would immediately be like, oh, it took this person 30 seconds to make this piece or
Hmm.
to let a computer make it. But after just thinking it over, like art is subjective, you know. Like I watched a video on fonts
Hmm.
last night, just enjoying that because I find I have an interest in fonts. But yeah, it's just so subjective that I don't have a firm stance, which I think is the best thing for art, because it's really, again, up to the viewer to discern how valuable something like that is. Um, so yeah,
Hmm.
always trying to monitor myself when it comes to that,
It's a
because the
very
last thing I want to do is be one of those you know, old people complaining about things changing. Um,
See, I'm aiming for that. Like,
are you?
I can be like a grumpy old man. I feel like I already look kind of like a grumpy old man, so I could get away with being a grumpy old man.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, I feel like I'm either like 5 or I'm like 65,
Yeah,
depending on the day.
but
Definitely.
I actually think that's like a trait of artists. I think even when you're a kid and that, yeah, I think there was a very much a level of anyone who's interested in creative stuff that you already feel old as a child, and you're just
Oh,
like,
sure, yeah.
I have the imagination of a 5-year-old, but I have the mindset of a 60-year-old.
Sure. Yeah, I
And
remember being a kid and people would say like, "Oh, you're such a an old soul."
yes,
And then
that's the phrase.
you grow up and you're just, now you're just the soul because you've already attained the old. Uh, but yeah, no, I've always loved art since I was a kid, being obsessed with monsters. And when I was a kid, there was this toy called Mighty Max, which I just loved. They were like Polly Pockets for boys,
I remember
and
Mighty Max. No, I don't feel like a lot of people do remember Mighty Max. I don't know
yeah,
if
I
that's
mean,
niche.
yeah, I mean, when it comes to maybe our generation, I don't know, but yeah, always interested in monsters, and so it's kind of stuck around. But it wasn't until kind of this project that people started noticing, I think, out of curiosity and whatnot.
Do you ever get attached to work?
Oh, it's quite a process making something. Uh,
I mean, you're
the first,
dedicating a lot of your time to make something, and then you do just put it away.
yeah, yeah, the process is kind of it starts off with like, what am I doing? What am I going to do with this? Then you get inspired, and then you keep going, and then it gets to a point where you're frustrated, and I'll catch myself thinking like, "Oh, this is the worst. I hate this. The color is off, or whatever. I wish I I wish I can go back in time and have done this thing differently.
Hmm.
And then oftentimes I get to the very end and I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like it. But I don't think there's ever been anything that I would really want to keep. Um, there were a couple pieces where I thought like, oh, this is really cool, and I like this one more than the rest.
Hmm.
Um, Especially as time goes on, because I've everything's trial and error. Because I'm self-taught, like I don't
I
have a
was
lot
going to
of
say,
background.
yeah, you taught yourself all this. Like,
Yeah, just through trial and error, and there's been a lot of errors along the way. But as time goes on, and I want to keep pushing myself a little bit, so I think with every piece, I tend to like it a little bit more, just
mhm.
because I think it added a little extra to whatever it is.
You get, I mean, maybe it's like a more personal question. Is like, do you get some level of self catharsis by giving it away?
I think so. I mean, you could really look into like the psychology of it and say like, do I
Not to pick
appreciate?
on you too much,
No,
but
no,
like,
no, no, totally. Yeah, you could look into it and think like, why is this guy doing this? Does he not
mhm,
appreciate himself or whatever? I don't know. I just love the idea of like it when I bring something back. Usually on like Instagram, I'll post like, oh, I'm bringing this thing back, and sometimes I'll post the general location of where it is.
mhm,
Um, but ideally, it would just be a random person finding a piece. I think because I would think that would be cool if
yeah,
I was just some, passerby looking at things people don't want, so they bring it to a thrift shop. Just a little treasure. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a mixture of, I'm humble and I want to be humble. Um, but then also kind of what I want to see outside of what I make as well. So it's kind of a
mm.
mix of both. But I'm sure there are therapists out there that would look at it and say like, "Oh, this guy, look at that trauma or something." I don't know, but yeah,
I mean, yeah, I can kind of, I was going to say empathize with it. It's something which very very much interests me because it's a question which has been posed to me on more than one occasion of doing not to the scale that you do. Like I produce a zine which I give away
mm,
for free.
yeah,
It costs me time and money, but I go to zine fairs and my table is always free, and you can take a zine, and it's about encouraging creativity in people and getting them to open up and that kind of thing. Um, but more than often, I will get a question, which is, surely this costs you money. Like, why would you give this away for free? And I always find it interesting of the mentality of some people versus myself and likes of you
mm,
who are willing to give something away, which is taking you time and effort
right.
to create. And yeah, I'm not sure where that comes from. Like, it's almost like an inbuilt thing with some people, but not other people.
Yeah, yeah, and I think at least like Western culture, we see things through a lens of uh, getting something from something else. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, a lot of people would see that through goods and services and getting paid for something. And in reality, I think I do get paid in a certain way. Doing any kind of art to me is, therapy to an extent. Um, so I definitely get that out of it. I get out, the fun out of it. Um, but uh, but yeah, I, it's kind of a mixture of so many things as to why. Yeah.
Definitely. I almost feel this like I think it's something which I'd like to encourage more artists to engage in because,
Hmm.
like you say, markets and kind of trends, and obviously the internet have they've put a lot of focus on what you can sell and what you can profit from
Hmm.
within art, and I think in a way we lost some level of creating for the sense of fun, creating
Hmm.
for the enjoyment of it. I always think when I think guerrilla artists, I always think back to kind of protest artists in the 80s and
Hmm.
all those kinds of things. And obviously they were on a different scale because there was a level of like vandalism involved, which
Sure.
was to make a statement. And obviously the world retaliated against that in the way that the world do and systems
Sure.
do. Um, But nowadays, it's people worry so much about that liability and
Mhm.
what that will mean for them because the in a way I don't know, I feel like maybe there's a sense in some people that they can't disconnect their name from their work because they want the credit as much as they
Mhm.
want to see the audience and they want to see the reaction and give people these great things. They still want the little credit line.
Mhm.
And I don't know, maybe that is generational, maybe that's, or maybe that's not, maybe it's just the hold of online and whatnot kind of pulling people in and changing what they could create. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I mean, like I've seen so many news reports and whatnot of,
Hmm.
like Gen Z, they want to be famous, they want to whatever, it's a lot of that. I want likes, I want this. But at the same time, there was a journal article, I think from a year or two ago, where they were trying to determine, I don't think selfishness is the word, but trying to think of the word. I guess people want expecting something to be given to them. And they ran
Okay.
this through different generations. And oddly enough, baby boomers tended to be the most self-centered, I guess,
Hmm.
when it comes to some things. So yeah, I don't know. But again, I vowed to refrain from being one of those people that gets old and says, everything's falling apart. These young kids don't know what they're doing. They're lazy, whatever. I've made it a goal to just avoid that because that's been going on for forever too. Those generational divides. I'm sure there's so many times, with my parents, when the Beatles came out, it was a travesty. So I think that happens every generation. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how they would react differently to things, but the internet is definitely it's something that scares me to an extent without
Hmm.
sounding like a dramatic, panicky old person. But I think a lot of the state of the world right now is very partisan and divided because we tend to I like to think of the internet as it's kind of like the invention of fire.
Hmm.
It's the capability of fire or the internet is incredible. You could do so much with it. The internet is an encyclopedia, but just like fire, it could burn everything down as well. Um, we're so divided because we fall into these cubbies, whether it be politically or theology or whatever. And through algorithms and whatnot, we tend to just see and reaffirm those beliefs. So
Hmm.
I think people have gotten a lot more extreme about things. So when it comes to those ideologies, I worry a little bit about where things are going.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how I would bring that back to artwork, but I mean, I think everything is again tied to ideology and whatnot. Um, so yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes. And then, oddly enough, a lot of Gen Z that I've interacted with and spoken to, they're a lot better at determining, what's
Hmm.
the proper source of information because they're used to the internet, so they know like this source is not reliable, this one is. So I think with that, there's a little less worry.
Yeah.
Uh,
It becomes more kind of like a journey for, for the younger generation to, get involved with. Like you say, I think I agree. There's a level of partisanism within discussions at the moment. I remember having a chat with Lucy Sullivan, who's a comic artist from the UK, um, and she was getting not upset but worried about the conversations which people were having, and
Mhm.
how quickly people jump to anger and defense and all that kind of stuff, and then remembered having the same conversation with a friend in person and not online, and
Right.
there was space between the conversation, which meant no one was jumping to conclusions because
Right.
they didn't have that time to settle down and have a discussion. Like like this show is more about discussion than anything else. um and I think it's interesting to watch how we're affected by that, and then, as you say, the younger generation are pretty good at tracking back on those things. And
Yeah, no, that's all I can hope for too. Is
yeah.
I mean, ideally, if in elementary school, if it was required that people would have to take like a research class or a source class or something, that would be great. But yeah,
Do
I
you
guess we'll see what happens.
do you think you can teach guerrilla art?
I'm
Or
sorry.
do you think you can teach like doing guerrilla art, mischief art, or do you think it's just like a naturally inherent thing in some people?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it would be taught as art. I think it's
Mm,
just something like, for example, like my sensibilities when it comes to that kind of thing, I'm 100% certain come from my dad, who he wasn't quite a hippie, but he was very political and he liked to stir the pot as well. So I know that's kind of where that comes from. I think it's more of an attitude than it's
mm,
directly related to art, but I think if you do go into the arts, then those two things kind of meld together, and naturally, whether it's guerrilla art or just any kind of mischief or whatnot in artwork, those two things come together. But I don't think you could teach it. Well, I don't know. I mean, at the same time, you can teach people to question things. You could teach people to question society and economic systems and things like that.
mm.
So it's a possibility. You can give somebody the tools for it. Uh, but I think it just kind of comes down to the person.
I think as well, like we were saying kind of at the beginning, I think in some ways it's better when you don't take something like this and try to teach it.
Mhm,
It's better that someone discovers they can do this kind of
mhm,
on their own. I vividly remember kind of being in school and being taught art when I was 12, 13 and whatnot. And they obviously hand you like Renaissance and they hand
mhm,
you, landscape paintings and say, this is art. This is exactly what art should be. And
mhm,
then at the same time going into, the library and picking up a book and finding out about street graffiti and
mhm.
going, oh, well, I was told this wasn't art. Um,
Yeah,
and it had a much more significant impact. And I think maybe it would have tainted it if my school teachers had tried to show me
sure.
this was
Yeah,
cool and been like, this is what art is. And my brain would have gone, no, I can't do that.
yeah,
That's the institution.
yeah, totally. And it's weird, like getting older, I'll notice changes in myself when it comes to artwork.
Mm,
When I was younger, I would look at like a Jackson Pollock and be like, this is ridiculous.
yeah.
Like, but the older I get, the more I realize, like, oh no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that people can appreciate something like that. Um, I was never a fan of like abstract art, but again, older I get, the more I realize that it's the subjective nature of it that brings importance to it. And there's nothing worse, I think, like having been a teenager. This is kind of giving away my age, but being a
Mm,
teenager and watching like Banksy
mm,
kind of go from this like unknown street artist to what he is now. There's nothing worse to me than seeing like an auctioneer
yeah.
trying to sell a Banksy piece, just because it goes against so much of the general principle of it. Um, so I think that's one thing: is art should never be taken too seriously. Political art, there's a message behind it, and it's good to get across that message. But in general, I think things like that should not be taken seriously.
No, I'm kind of glad you mentioned like auctioneers selling that kind of stuff because it always just makes me sad. Like
Yeah, yeah,
every time I see it, like you say, I think I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you kind of ruined the point now.
sure.
It's
And
beleaguered the point.
a lot of art too. I mean, a lot of wealthier people will purchase it as I don't know what it would be described as, like a liquid good or something like that. It's a good investment.
Yeah.
So it's not really about the art. It's about the monetary value, I guess, of it. Um, there's really no appreciation of it. Some of this artwork is just housed in a warehouse. So um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that bothers me.
yeah, no, it's definitely upsetting. So yeah, and kind of going back to the censorship, like kids not being allowed to see Michelangelo's work is just
Mm,
it's insane. And just yeah, censorship. You could show uh, somebody's head getting blown up, but like God forbid you see like a anatomical human body or something.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we live in a very strange world, or I mean, the U.S. culture. Um,
I think I was
has it?
actually
Oh,
So I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, I think I was actually talking to someone about this the other day. We were talking about Pulp Fiction and
Hmm.
that whole genre of things, and I was saying I watched the Reanimator
Hmm.
on
Oh
television
yeah,
when I moved
yeah.
to the US, and I was watching it, and I was like, "Oh, I remember this bit." And it got to the moment where there's the sex scene, and they cut
Hmm.
the sex scene, and I was like, "Hang on a minute,
Yeah,
what just
yeah,
happened?"
yeah. I visited the UK when I was younger, and I picked up a newspaper. On like the fifth page, there was just a topless woman. And I was like, "My God, this is." I didn't realize how Puritan the U.S. was. Like I've heard of it, but I never witnessed it firsthand. And it's true. Yeah, it's very strange. There's a lot of religion, mixed in there, but
Mm,
yeah, yeah, it's bizarre. I'd like to think, kind of going back to the whole Charlie Chaplin thing, that as time goes on, things will get better
mm,
um, in regards to art or politically or what have you. Yeah, because the last 10 years has been insane, and
yeah.
yeah, I don't know where it's going to go from here.
I think.
But no, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it's interesting, kind of like you mentioning that, like the different ways different countries react to art as well. Like we mentioning, like Michelangelo's David, and that being censored in the US, and it causing absolute riot in Italy, where people
Mhm.
were not understanding what had happened. Why would you do this? How can you call it offensive? It's David.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just wondering, kind of how your style of art and your process would be interpreted in like a charity shop in the UK. I I
Yeah, I mean
I
it.
think it'd be interesting to just watch like unfold. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. No, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, based on just like online interactions, there's always
Mm,
going to be some people who are offended. People who say like, why don't you just make an original piece completely, or things like that. I don't know. There's everybody's different, different cultures too. Like I said, I try to make a point to make it use mass-produced pieces. It's kind of like Karl Marx in a sense of, this artwork is so far removed from an artist
mm,
that doing anything to it is to me negated. Like it doesn't affect the artist whatsoever. Or,
yeah.
you know, um, yeah, it would be interpreted different places by different people. I'm sure if somebody in, southern states of the US found a piece versus, Seattle, there would be a very
Mm.
different reaction to it.
I, I uh,
Um,
I get the feeling your work wouldn't make it out the store if it was found by someone in
yeah,
certain areas of the
yeah,
US. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, after I made the Virgin Mary one, I thought, oh yeah, wow, okay. I didn't think this was still a thing, but sure, totally. Like, it's a problem, I guess. Yeah, yeah. I don't really like. I'm a very political person, but I don't really put
mm,
that in the artwork. Just because I think again, humor is more healing than I get message. I try to get political messages out across different avenues.
mm,
Uh, when it comes to this, I think humor is and artwork is the one thing that, for the most part, brings us together. I think we found a way to even put a wedge in that too, but. One of the funniest things, and I've told this to a couple people, but there was a person who followed me on my personal account because I appreciated their artwork.
mm,
And the 2020 election came up, and I was posting things, and there was interaction in which they, said "f you," blah blah blah. My person's gonna win, yada yada, and they blocked me. And before they blocked me, I said, "Well, art is more important. We could at least agree on that." But by that point, they already blocked me.
yeah.
And then I created this separate account and I started doing art. And over time, and then this person happened to follow me and say, like, I
Mm,
love your artwork. It's wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, like, yeah, see, art is,
yeah.
yeah, it's important. It's interesting for sure.
It
But yeah.
yeah. I definitely think it's interesting. I almost feel when it kind of comes to art, when there is like a level of anonymity to it, I think it is interesting watching who gets involved with it, because I've had that a couple of times, like you say, of being surprised at who likes the work when
Hmm.
when when it comes from you know it comes from one aspect of your personality, and then that person, and they go, oh yeah, I really like this, and I'm always like, oh, that's complete surprise that it could connect, which I guess is
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely.
Things. I think it's I've had a experience as well before, whereas I mean I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to watch someone buy your work.
Let's see. I don't think I sometimes stick around for a little bit
Mm,
for the most part. Lately, I just kind of get out of there quickly. There were a couple times where I saw somebody like see it,
yeah.
and like there was one guy that was taken aback, and I heard him say like, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Goodwill," to his friend, and yeah, that's a big compliment to me. But no, I haven't really seen anybody buy it. I've heard stories, people going to the checkout and person working there looks confused or says something. But yeah, no, not really. And the crazy thing about thrift shops is, as long as you don't take something out without permission, they don't really
Mm,
care about you sneaking something in. Because
yeah,
again,
that's
everything you find at a thrift shop is things that people don't want anymore. So
it's technically just a donation. So
yeah, pretty much double the profit.
yeah,
Can't
oh,
really argue with that.
double double the profit, but also no profit for you, the person who made
Yeah,
it.
yeah, totally. Yeah,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it. Love the
Recently, somebody asked, said I should have like a gallery or something, and I thought
mm,
about it. So I might kind of retain pieces for a little while for that, but yeah, afterwards I still want to disperse them
mm.
probably all at once.
Yeah, I think it's important too. I think as well, like it's like you've been saying, it gives people access to something which they might not necessarily be able to see.
Yeah.
Kind of like we were saying, you get taught or shown things in one way or another, and told that this is what it will be, and having something which upsets that, even in like a positive way or a negative way, I think is
Mm.
valuable, and more so what art's about.
Absolutely. That's very well said. I completely agree. Definitely. Yeah, and yeah, if I make a piece, if I like try to see myself through the eyes of like a little kid coming across a monster somewhere, that's kind of to me that's rewarding. And again, it doesn't matter really how much I spend or the time I put into it. I think just that kind of feeling um, makes it worth it for sure.
And then you can do whatever you want in your regular time to earn money. That's what I
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
artists.
that's the boring stuff. Yeah, that's the human boring, side of things is the money aspect. And then the only reason I would make something and sell it, which I'm in the process of doing, is
Mm,
just because, you know, I get a lot of DMs saying like, "Do you sell your stuff? Do you sell your stuff? Can you please sell me something?" And there's people
mhm.
asking me if I do commissions, and just like, sorry, no. Like you would have to come to Phoenix and try to find something. So I figured I would make something little, for people to buy if they really, really want to. And I guess that'll fund, paint that I would need for other pieces. But yeah, no, it's rewarding in itself.
I just think there's a level of um, rewarding in being able to tell people no as well.
Hmm.
Like I don't know why, but it's very comforting to especially like say when someone asks for something, you're just like, no, you're not playing the game. This is the game.
Yeah, no, I mean there is something to that, and I've had to learn along the way. uh, the process of saying no and whatnot. But
Mm,
the only commission I've done is I had a friend who is a teacher, and she had me Zoom with her class and like read a story. And I picked I forget the artist's name, but he wrote a book about Guillermo del Toro,
mm,
and kind of or he wrote it, and then this other person did the artwork, but just about his love of monsters. And in the background of this video Zoom with them, they were seeing, my office with monsters and things, and
Hmm.
they asked me to make them a penguin. So only commission I've done is make this like classroom of fifth graders a monster. But aside from that, yeah, no commissions, nothing like that. And I think expectation too. I really don't like living up to people's expectation in that way.
Mm.
Uh, Again, back to David Bowie playing to the gallery. Uh, yeah, that stress of trying to make something for the vision of somebody else is it's
Yeah,
not rewarding, and I think it does make that's your worst work.
definitely. I think children are always an interesting like audience to have because I think it's very hard to disappoint children in terms
Yeah, and
of
they're super
creation.
honest too,
Yeah,
incredibly honest. Um, yeah, I didn't know what to expect because like I made this thing and it ended up looking a lot creepier than I anticipated for like a,
right.
a class of fifth graders, but the reaction to it was kind of again what I would want just anybody stumbling on a piece, is they are taken aback, but they're interested and yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe the greatest compliment for like children seeing is your work is they see it and then they go tell somebody else about it. I think
Yeah. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
like if an adult did that, I wouldn't really care, but if a kid did that, like yeah,
Oh,
I've
absolutely, for
I've
sure.
made it.
Yeah,
Tim,
absolutely.
Timmy over there, he said this guy's work's great. I'm like, cool, done. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Not to like again divulge identity or anything like
mm,
that, but when I was a kid, back in I think third grade, um, I drew a pickle with a superhero cape on it, and we called them Super Pickle,
nice.
which isn't not a very creative name, but whatever.
No,
And what started as this dumb drawing turned into like a school club dedicated to art and to this fictional pickle.
nice.
And what's crazy is it followed me throughout the years. Even in high school, people were like, "Oh, were you the guy that drew the pickle?" And I was like, "Yeah, totally." Uh, so I love that. I
That's
guess
amazing.
the impact of a drawing or artwork, creating that kind of community, and
Definitely.
just like the kids and reacting to things. Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah, I think we need more of that. I think yeah, like you say, I think we're in a I won't say tumultuous time because I think we are in a tumultuous time, but at the same time, I feel like it discredits with the time we're in. I think we're in a volatile time where
Yeah, yeah,
we need better access to allowing people ways to express themselves and
mhm.
access to things which are expressive so they can understand it. Um,
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, there'll be a lot of damage down the line. But I think you're doing a great job of introducing that.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's fun. That's for sure. If I, piss off people, that's whatever. But for the most part, I think just the general idea is a lot of fun and anything to shake somebody up a little bit.
Mm,
We get so used to our daily lives and the routine. So anything that makes somebody do a double take to me is worth it.
definitely, I completely agree. And I imagine this podcast will make people do a double take because it's
Yeah, I
the
hope so. I mean, yeah, you're just
outside the usual format.
yeah. Hopefully the followers that like my hands you know, get off on this. So that's great.
This is what
Uh,
happens when you get two mischief makers in one phone call. Just
yeah,
we should
absolutely.
we should make some mischief.
Yeah,
That's the way
it's the
forward.
best thing to do.
Alrighty.
Definitely.
We should probably round out there. I only have one more question for you. It's been lovely to chat to you today. But I'm asking every guest this year, who should I speak to next?
Oh man,
I know it's a tough question.
I was kind of thinking about this earlier. There's one person. I think she's in the UK. I have to bleep this, but I think it's what the fuck Pots or WTF Pots.
Okay.
She does. She makes awesome artwork and ceramics and whatnot, pottery that would easily get censored in Florida. That's for
Hmm.
sure. But no, she's great. She does amazing work. Very mischievous too. Um, there's I mean, one of my favorite artists that I found over the years is Craig Gleason. He does a lot of illustration. He's like super well known.
Hmm.
He's really great. And then another artist, Captain Love Handles. I really dig his work. He's Ed Roth and Ratfink. His creations are a huge inspiration to me.
Hmm.
And he's I guess you have to be like a license. You have to get licensed from the estate of Ed
Yeah.
Roth to commercially make Ratfink art. So, but he's a licensed Ratfink artist. He's really awesome. Yeah, there's so many artists that I appreciate, and the community on Instagram in particular is wonderful. I've made a lot of virtual friends that way. So, but yeah, those are great. Definitely.
I like it. I like the idea of this becoming a mischief podcast. Just more mischief makers.
Yeah, yeah. I think the WTF pots. I'm pretty sure somebody brought it into a museum as well, which caused
That's amazing.
controversy. I won't say what the piece was, but
Yeah.
it was yeah, awesome for sure.
Here I thought I was getting the edge by leaving zines on subways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, it's been great to catch up with you. Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on.
no, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, hopefully somebody got something out of looking at my hands and listening to me talk.
I'm sure they will, depending on the format they get. The weirder part will be someone who listens to the audio version of this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we keep referencing hands, and they'll have no idea what's going on. Which is,
yeah.
just again, we're just poking the bear.
Perfect. That's the way to do it.
All right. In that case, we will talk to these guys later. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate the reaching out.
All right.